Thanks for clicking! A growing number of renters are just waiting for prices to drop before jumping into Canada's housing market. This according to the media's interpretation of a new poll released by Royal LePage. But, says the media via their good friend Royal LePage CEO Phil Soper, those renters could indeed be disappointed, as, for the past 75 years, prices have risen by 5% per year. As such, those waiting for those price drops may be missing their window of opportunity. Meanwhile, unlike those waiting around for rate drops, says our good friend Phil Soper, strategic buyers are beginning to move. So those buyers that are strategic, those buyers that play the game smart, they're the ones that are buying now.
That's great, Doc, if you want to miss yet another opportunity here and watch your colleagues get rich doing clinical trials, and don't buy a share and hang up the phone.
That clip was from Boiler Room. It's about a Bertie Madoff type stock brokerage where salesmen sell stock in non-existent companies. That part was Vin Diesel showing a new trainee how to instill a fear of missing out in the salesman's mark.
When I grow up, I want to be just like you.
But it's not just Soper's reliable, unearned arrogance that's worthy of attention. It's also the Globe and Mail's, Financial Post, and BNN Bloomberg's reporting on it that I think are worthy of assessing where we get our news.
He's wonderful. He's wonderful.
So what I want to do today is go over the Royal LePage poll and how the media is reporting on it, take a look at what that poll actually says in contrast to how it's being reported, and then discuss some implications. We do have a big couple of weeks coming up with Stats Canada set to release Canada's inflation data for the month of May on Monday, and June's real estate data being released by the local boards the following week. We'll obviously have an update out on both on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this poll. Onto the poll. As mentioned, the media is reporting that this poll indicates that a growing number of renters are waiting for prices to drop before buying a home. According to the Globe and Mail, 40% of renters across Canada reported that they are choosing to wait for property prices to fall further, compared with 30% in 2024. Which would be a real sign of pent-up demand if 40% of all renters were just waiting for prices to drop to jump into the market. That would indicate to me that no matter how much prices should be dropping, there would be a floor on those prices.
We don't have much time.
Except it's not true. The 40% that are waiting for prices to drop were just 40% of those who considered buying a property rather than renting, which only constituted 28% of the survey. So if the survey were 100 people, the Globe and Mail's presentation of these facts would have us believe that 40 of them would be jumping into the market when prices dropped. However, the actual data tells us that only 28 people had considered buying a home before renting, and in total, 11 are planning on buying when prices drop. A big drop in the potential demand between what the poll actually says and how it's being reported by the Globe and Mail. But we can't really just blame the Globe and Mail. Royal LePage didn't even get the description of its poll correct, with Phil Soper noting that many renters, including the 40% who told us they're holding out for further price declines, are choosing to wait.
He's the best there is.
So that's the Globe and Mail. Moving on, according to the Financial Post interpretation of this same poll, more than half of renters are eager to buy a home, something that Phil Soper, the man himself, alluded to when discussing the poll on Bloomberg.
54% of renters say they plan to be homeowners and they'd like to within 2 years. Now that's aspirational.
Wow, that's big. 54% of renters wanting to jump into the market over the next 2 years. That tells me that that's an awful lot of pent-up demand. An awful lot of demand that is just waiting for the conditions to be correct, and they'll jump back into the market, putting a floor on prices, or even sending them to the moon, were that to be the case. But if we look at the actual poll, we find that 16% of renters want to buy in the next 2 years, 21% in the next 2 to 5 years, and 18% in more than 5 years. So 16% of renters looking to buy, eager to buy over the next 2 years, or 54% as reported on Bloomberg. Now, Bloomberg was obviously prepared for this interview as they previewed it earlier on in the day.
A lot of people eyeing the next 2 to 5 years in terms of when they plan to buy a home.
Really appreciate that, Kamal. Those are some pretty sobering survey results. And we're going to talk to the CEO of Royal LePage, Phil Soper, about it coming up a little bit later on The Open. So,
as such, did the host of that show, John Ehrlichman, press Phil Soper on the inaccuracy of his data?
the other thing, just to get a little deeper into as a renter.
So no follow-up for Soper, and it's not like Bloomberg didn't very well know that Soper was not providing an accurate description. As it even noted in its article on its website, just 16% plan to buy within the next 2 years.
He's my special boy!
Yeah. And speaking of support for Phil Soper,
May data showed home prices are finally turned a corner and are likely to start rising again. So how long there'll be relief, we don't know, but it will probably be short-lived.
Wow, that's a big claim. Prices are set to start rising again as we've turned a corner. Given that in Toronto alone, since December, prices have been doing this while the amount of active inventory did this, and Toronto had its worst sales numbers, save COVID, for the past 12 years in May, surely Bloomberg is going to do a follow-up on that claim.
Now you're indicating that maybe there's even an indication that prices for homes could be picking up?
Yes, absolutely.
Soper gave no more data on pricing, and of course there was no follow-up from the host.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you too, Angel.
Speaking of media follow-up, I think it's worth noting at this point that we ran a poll on this channel last month that had 1,100 respondents, asking respondents if they thought Canada's media was more biased towards the real estate industry or incompetent, and found that 61% of those polled think they're biased. With that said, there was significant support for an option to have both. So, the Globe and Mail, far overstating the number of renters just waiting for price drops to jump into the market. The Financial Post cites 16% buying in 2 years as half of renters being eager to get into the market. And Bloomberg, as usual, completely enthralled with Royal LePage CEO Phil Soper, allowing wildly overstated claims without question. I couldn't find the detailed stats on all of the readership between the Globe and Mail, the Financial Post, and BNN Bloomberg, at least stats from Wikipedia, which I hate using Wikipedia to present stats as it's easily manipulated. But suffice to say, between these three companies, they receive an awful lot of viewership across Canada. The industry has that kind of power, that kind of manipulation behind it, and we're still seeing these kinds of sales numbers coming out of Toronto, the worst save COVID in the past 12 years. I think that's telling us all we need to know about the disconnect between incomes and prices here in Canada. Given all of this massive support that the industry is obviously receiving and people still aren't buying it, something has obviously changed.
We're playing now, boys. Let's celebrate.
That also from Boiler Room. Good flick if you want to check it out. With that said, whether or not that FOMO starts to take hold remains to be seen, but we will obviously continue to track how all of this plays out on this channel. Make sure you click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, thanks so much for watching.